So I was recently on Instagram and I was looking at this mixing tip, and it talked about using sidechain compression as kind of a matter of fact way of setting up a compressor. And I realized that it's really not something that you mess with that often unless you have a reason to. So in this video, I want to give you 3 reasons to actually use sidechain compression. So the first kind of obvious one to me is based on the Fletcher-Munson curve. The Fletcher-Munson curve gives you the sensitivity of your ears. So depending on what frequencies are most sensitive, you'll actually see a boost or a decrease on the curve. And so for our ears, we actually have a sensitivity to 3K. So we are most sensitive to that frequency. And this makes sense. I mean, we are humans. We're made to hear other humans, especially small children that we have to take care of. We are built to hear a baby cry. That's why it's so annoying. So this kind of makes sense if you think of, we're not meant to pick up on the sounds of snare drums. We're meant to hear other humans. And so we are most sensitive to those frequencies of human speech. So 3K is probably the most sensitive frequency. And I think that the best example for sidechain compression comes at using it for guitar. We actually can dial in a guitar tone and have the compressor work for us so that we don't experience too much guitar if it becomes kind of very shrill, very piercing at about the 3K range. So I want to play you this track just a little bit. It's called Under the Jaw by Flint Ziegler. This track we did years ago, and we'll go ahead and turn this off for now. But check this out. Just let the video sync. For some reason, it's giving me a hard time right now.
Of a man and his steel, setting's the place where the ore meets the mill. Martin Myers, he worked hard every day. He watched the mill take a man to early grave. Bending those rails was all he'd ever known. He had no family, the mill was his home, you know.
So there's overall, a pretty good tone out of this amp. This is actually directly in to a brown face 1963 Fender Deluxe, one of my favorite amps that I've ever gotten to record. We only had one camera, and so I decided, well, I'll use a reflection to get the drummer, which is actually myself on this kind of percussion setup here. And we focused in on Flint here singing. And so we were able to kind of get 2 for 1 out of one camera here using this kind of ghostly reflection. So let me listen. I think I just heard one of these kind of shrill 3K kind of notes out of the guitar. Okay, so right there, we hear that note, and it's just this kind of, just this kind of note, and we're very sensitive to that note. So what we can do is actually turn on sidechain compression. And what we're going to do is we actually split off the signal from the main signal. So we have the signal that's getting compressed, and then we have a signal that the compressor is actually listening to. So there's a distinction here, because sometimes we set up sidechain compression and it's to bass guitar that listens to a kick drum. And that's a little bit different application because those are 2 different sources. Here, we're actually talking about the same source. We're just splitting it off, modifying it some, and then telling the compressor to react to that modified version. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually kind of make it a little bit more sensitive to what we're sensitive to. The compressor is a machine, it doesn't know. But if we tell it, hey, we're sensitive to 3K, pay more attention to this, we're going to tell it when to compress a little more heavy-handed on those specific notes. So let's listen to this sidechain filter here, and then we're going to turn it off and we won't hear it anymore. We'll actually hear the main signal passing through the compressor. Right there. And it doesn't have to be super tight. I mean, you know, it could be it doesn't have to be exact, just, you know, abouts. Yeah, so that's the stuff that we want the compressor to kind of keep an eye out for. So now that we have it dialed in, take it off, and the compressor will react in a little bit biased way, and it'll react and turn down automatically for us those guitar notes. That's a little extreme because I don't, you know, typically guitar, I like to have it a little more bite than just that. I don't want to kill the guitarness from the guitar. You know, I want to allow it to be a guitar and be a little annoying. So let me take this out now and just listen to the amount of bite that it has, that right in your ear. It's actually a good note right there. Okay, so it caught it a little bit. Let's make it a little more extreme. Turn up the ratio. Yeah, so we can really make it just kill that note. If we don't like the note, we can make it take care of it for us. And, you know, this is, again, just kind of making it more sensitive. So it doesn't have to be the note at 3K. It could be any area that we don't like. And, of course, we could do the reverse, okay, like just really advanced stuff, because we can take out some of the lows, right? Maybe we want a more fuller guitar, and so we can not just boost using the sidechain, but we can start kind of shaping and taking out with bell curves certain notes so that it is able to speak a little more. So it's almost like an EQ. You know, this is actually preferable to EQ, because with EQ, you're always going to have a phase shift or some sort of time shift if you use linear phase. There's no free lunch. It's always better to move the mic than to fix it in the mix. And this is really true. So this is a kind of a free, I don't know, sneaky way of altering the tone without using EQ. You can have it turn down almost like an automation. You can have it turn down the notes almost like an EQ by making it more sensitive to the stuff that you don't like. Again, one more time. So it just really sings, it really pokes out without the sidechain compression. So kind of technique number 2 is something that I don't think is really talked about, and it really should. It's really a hidden feature, and it's inspired by the distressor. And I didn't quite understand this until I did an official video over at Sonic Scoop for Empirical Labs and the Arouser plugin. And I really learned inside and out with the hardware distressor and the Arouser plugin itself, really mastered both compressors and kind of picked up on this cool technique. It's this kind of push idea, and it actually pushes up for the frequencies of around 5K. And we can see this if I were to pull up maybe just the same plugin here, but we actually see that the default for the Arouser is maybe it's more like 6K. There's a little tiny blue dot right here. And so on the distressor, that's kind of the value that you get when you enable this feature. It gives a little push at about 6K. The Q is a little wider than what we're just working with. It's about a 9.5 dB boost. And so the idea is that it's not a distressor. It's not a de-esser. It's not a de-esser outright. It's kind of a halfway de-esser, because what we're doing is we're kind of weighting the compressor to be a little more sensitive on the high frequencies. You could kind of compare it to like a high pass, setting on the sidechain, for example. But what we're doing here is we're very gently making it a little more sensitive to the S frequencies. And so this is great for spoken word. When we are adding compression, a lot of times an 1176 can make S's a lot worse. And so then we have to add a de-esser. It kind of creates an issue. But adding a little bit of a sidechain push at 5, 6, 7, even 8K can actually kind of help kind of bias this compressor to react a little bit more sensitively to the high frequencies. In fact, this is totally appropriate because the low frequencies have a lot more energy to them, and the high frequencies have less energy to them. So we almost have to kind of keep that low end from overtaking the actions of the compressor. And we actually add in some high end to say, okay, you're mostly paying attention to that meat of that vocal. Well, pay a little bit more attention to the high end as well. So we actually can make it more sensitive, and it's not, again, a de-esser necessarily, but it kind of halfway gets you there. So you don't have to use a de-esser. Let's actually pull up this vocal, and this vocal is pretty rough. It's one of the most difficult vocals, and hey, I love my friend Flint, but he does not have an easy vocal to mix. It's just not easy. So let me take all this stuff off. And let me just show you the raw vocal and this concept in play.
Bending those rails was all he'd ever known. He had no family, the mill was his home,
We go a little more aggressive here.
Great. Bending those rails was all he'd ever known. He had no family, the mill was his home.
And I was talking to one of my friends. We were talking about kind of go-to settings here. And if there's ever any doubt on what you should do, check the release time is kind of the first thing, okay? Make sure it's not up at 500. That's not entirely useful. So kind of a slow attack, kind of a fast release. You could pick any ratio you want. You just kind of want to get going on something. But initial settings, medium attack, fast release, and just pick a ratio and get 5 to 7 dB of dynamic reduction.
A story of a man and his steel.
Really, really bad S's. I hate the RE20. Okay, like somebody tell me why the RE20 is so popular for vocal. I think it's awesome on guitar cabinet and kick drum, and that's it. SM7 just completely kills it. So I don't know. This is some of the worst vocal recording I've ever done, and I've never gotten it to sound very good on an RE20. I don't know why. It's just very brittle top end, kind of weird low end. I don't know. You clue me in if you like an RE20 and what kind of voice you have. But let's check out this sidechain. Okay, we know we have some S's. Can we do it all with just one plugin?
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Oh, so harsh.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
So you can hear that there's low frequencies in there. It's not just the highs, right? We could make a straight up de-esser by just cutting everything in the lows and boosting it as much as possible.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
You know, that would be much more of a traditional de-esser, but here we're just kind of skewing the sensitivity of the device to our favor.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Okay, we're going to go with that. So here it is without.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
And let me rebalance this volume here.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
With.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Even more.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Okay, and you know, maybe it's not a fair comparison. Let's dial in a little bit less compression here and just get it to pop on just those S's. I guess we'll go with 10-1. Let me play with it here.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Yeah, you can see right there, steel.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Okay, so again, here's just straight up normal compression.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel. Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
You know, really cool. And again, the reverse could be done. Okay, I could go right to, 200 kind of range. He's sitting up higher, about 500 in some of this, but I can do the reverse.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
So it's just killing his vocal on the meat. And if I were to actually reduce the meat of the vocal, let me see what happens.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Doesn't do anything because I reduced the low frequency. All the energy is in that low frequency. So now I have to boost, I have to compensate. This is all normal, you know. You have to constantly react. You change one settings, you got to go kind of circle back around.
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
So this is kind of an alternate way. Instead of boosting the highs, what we're doing is actually reducing the lows. Now, usually we do this in EQ where the effects are pretty audible. We're not hearing these boosts, okay? Again, it's like, I call it a backseat EQ, okay? A backseat driver EQ. We're not hearing the EQ adjustments, but it's affecting the tone. So again, it's a really cool way to shape the tone of something without going for an EQ. We're actually EQing the sidechain. Therefore, the compressor is kind of creating like an automation and making sure that all our tone is fairly even. So this is, this is definitely a great way to use this technique. Let me just kind of return this back. And this is built into, a distressor, okay? So you look to gear, you can read manuals, pick up on little things. Why was the gear built this way? Well, this is a pretty cool tip,
Let me tell you a story of a man and his steel.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, So, kind of the final kind of third reason of why you'd actually want to use sidechain compression is for the low end. I've kind of hinted at this a moment ago, but the idea is that you want to allow something to kind of pass through and then control kind of the exciting parts, the mids and the upper kind of frequencies. So something like drum bus could be really cool because we're able to keep the kick really loud, but then compress kind of some of the body and growliness of the toms and the snare, maybe the ring if we want that, but compress the cymbals. It doesn't get carried down. We don't actually hear the kick dragging our cymbals down and making them pump. So it's a great tip to actually use a high pass on a side chain, of a compressor. Again, this is different than a side chain where you're taking the bass guitar, shooting it over, and making it listen to the kick drum. Okay, those are two different sources. Here, we're literally having the signal and the detector signal. That's what it's called. And so we actually have two different sides to a compressor, and we're modifying what the compressor listens to. So let's check out our drum bus here and see what I have going on here. So I have the Shadow Hills plugin. I have it set up to the optical, and I really like the sound of this. Gosh, somebody can tell me what they like on this bottom compressor here. I always find it kind of difficult, but the optical can be really a joy to kind of just dial in and leave it. But I have a sidechain high pass right at 82, it looks like. So let's check out these drums. There's a lot of low end going on. And by using the high pass, we won't compress the low end. It'll sound like I'm increasing the low end. And again, it's not EQ, okay? Not EQ, but we are EQing and shaping, you could say. We are equalizing the tone without using the tool that's called EQ, okay? Because EQ has phase shift, or if you're using linear phase, you have like a time shift. So those artifacts aren't present in this technique, which makes it really cool, okay? It's like a backseat EQ type technique. Let me find my drums here.
Trails was all he'd ever known. He had
So yeah, this is, I think, perhaps a little more subtle than I was expecting, but it's definitely there. With the compression just full, wide open, seeing all the frequencies, you definitely get more control, and you want to be careful. At a high ratio, it can make your kick drum sound very small. So use preferably a low ratio and just be careful with this stuff. Now, you can kind of feather it on like a main mix, and that's actually a great place to check this out as well. Right now, I have an outboard compressor. It's on full right now, so it's actually controlling all the frequencies, but I can set it to leave the low frequencies alone, and those low frequencies actually tend to breathe a lot more. They become louder. And if I want to, I can kind of bring up the mid frequencies, compress them more, and add a little bit more excitement and apparent loudness. So it lets the low end be big, and it lets the apparent loudness be a little more louder, raising the RMS up, the average volume. And yeah, it's a pretty cool trick. So let me know what you thought of this. If you have any questions, I'll be hanging out. Comments below.
was a man to handle the troubles that he'd known.